David Park had built Harbor Eats from a single food truck into a chain of 15 restaurants across the Pacific Northwest. At 42, he was living the American dream. His restaurants were known for fresh seafood, friendly service, and treating employees well. Or so he thought. The problem started showing up in his weekly reports 3 months ago. The downtown Seattle location, one of his busiest spots, was getting complaints. Customers waited too long for food. Orders came out wrong. The dining room looked messy. Online reviews dropped from 4.5 stars to 3 stars in just 8 weeks. David called his regional manager, Tom Wilson, right away. Tom had been with the company for 5 years and managed 6 locations. He was supposed to visit each restaurant twice a week. "Tom, what's going on at the Seattle downtown spot?" David asked during their Monday morning call. "Everything looks fine to me, boss." Tom replied quickly, "Maybe just a few bad days. You know how it is in the restaurant business." But the complaints kept coming. David looked at the employee records. The restaurant had hired 12 new people in the past 2 months. That was way too many for a location that usually had very stable staff. "Tom, why are we hiring so many people? Are people quitting?" "Oh, you know, seasonal stuff. People move around." Nothing unusual. David didn't buy it. He had started Harbor Eats because he believed in treating workers fairly. His other restaurants had very low turnover. People stayed for years because he paid above minimum wage and offered good benefits. The next week brought more bad news. A food blogger who usually loved Harbor Eats wrote a harsh review of the Seattle location. She complained that her fish tacos took 45 minutes to arrive and were cold. The service was so slow that half her party left before getting their food. David decided to make a surprise visit. He drove to Seattle on a Thursday afternoon, not telling anyone he was coming. When he walked into the restaurant, his heart sank. Only 2 servers were working the lunch rush. Both looked stressed and overwhelmed. Tables had dirty dishes sitting on them. The hostess looked like she was about to cry as angry customers asked about their wait times. David found the assistant manager, a guy named Derek Thompson. Derek had been hired 6 months ago to help run day-to-day operations. "Derek, where is everyone? Why are there only 2 servers for lunch?" Derek seemed nervous. "We had a few people call in sick today. Tom knows about it. We're handling it fine." But it didn't look fine. David noticed that the kitchen seemed understaffed too. He could see only 3 people back there during what should have been the busiest time of day. He stayed for 2 hours watching everything. The few employees who were there worked like crazy. One cook in particular caught his attention. She was a small woman with dark hair tied back, probably in her 30s. She was doing the work of 2 people, running between different stations, never taking a break. When David asked Derek about her, Derek just shrugged. "Elena works hard. She covers when people don't show up." Something felt very wrong about the whole situation. David drove home feeling frustrated and confused. His company was supposed to be different. He paid well, offered benefits, and tried to create a family atmosphere. Why was this location falling apart? That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he had seen. The stressed employees, the messy restaurant, Derek's nervous answers, and especially that cook, Elena, who seemed to be doing everything while looking exhausted. He called Tom the next morning. "I visited the Seattle location yesterday. It was a mess, really. That's strange. I was just there on Tuesday and everything looked good." "Tom, there were only 2 servers during lunch rush. The kitchen was understaffed. Customers were angry. Must have been a bad day. I'll check it out again this week." But David had heard Tom make excuses too many times. He decided to try a different approach. He called the restaurant directly and asked to speak with the general manager. Derek answered, "This is David Park, the owner. I need to understand what's happening with staffing." Derek's voice changed immediately. "Oh, Mr. Park." "Yes, sir. We've had some challenges lately. A few people quit without notice. But Tom and I have everything under control. We're hiring new people every week." "If you're hiring people every week, why does the restaurant look understaffed?" "Well, you know, training takes time. People need to learn our systems." David hung up feeling even more frustrated. The answers didn't make sense. If they were hiring people constantly, where were they? And why did that one cook seem to be doing everything? He spent the weekend thinking about it. By Sunday night, he had made a decision that surprised even him. He was going to go undercover. David had never done anything like this before. He usually solved problems with meetings, reports, and phone calls. But clearly the normal approach wasn't working. People were telling him what they thought he wanted to hear, not what was really happening. Monday morning, David started planning his undercover mission. He would apply for a job at the Seattle restaurant using a fake name and background. But first he needed to change how he looked. David normally wore expensive suits and designer glasses. His gray hair was always perfectly styled. Everyone who worked for Harbor Eats knew what he looked like from company meetings and photos on the website. He drove to a cheap hair salon in a part of town where nobody would recognize him. A young woman with purple hair dyed his gray completely black. It took 3 hours and looked terrible, but it changed his appearance completely. Next, he bought contact lenses to replace his glasses. Then he went to thrift stores and bought old jeans, worn-out sneakers, and plain t-shirts. He practiced speaking with a slight accent and created a backstory about being a recent immigrant looking for work. The hardest part was creating fake identification. David called his head of security, someone he trusted completely, and explained what he was doing. Together, they created documents for Miguel Rodriguez, a 40-year-old man with restaurant experience who needed a job quickly. By Wednesday, David was ready. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. The black hair, contact lenses, and cheap clothes made him look like a completely different person. He drove to the Seattle restaurant and asked to speak with Derek about a job. Derek barely looked at him as he filled out an application for a dishwasher position. "Can you start tomorrow morning?" Derek asked. "We need people who will show up every day and work hard." "Yes, sir." "I need this job." "Good. Be here at 6 in the morning. Don't be late." As David walked out of the restaurant, his heart was pounding. In less than 12 hours, he would start working undercover in his own restaurant. He had no idea what he was about to discover, but he knew it was going to change everything. David's alarm went off at 5 in the morning. His stomach was full of butterflies as he got dressed in his thrift store clothes. He had never been this nervous about going to work, even when he first started Harbor Eats 10 years ago. The drive to the restaurant felt like the longest 20 minutes of his life. He kept practicing his accent and backstory in the car. Miguel Rodriguez from Guatemala, needed work badly, had experience in restaurant kitchens. Keep it simple, he told himself. Derek was already there when David arrived, looking tired and drinking coffee from a large cup. "You're Miguel, right?" "Good, you're on time. Follow me." The kitchen was busier than David expected for 6 in the morning. 3 people were already working, preparing for the breakfast rush. Derek walked him to the dish pit in the back corner. "This is your station. Wash everything that comes back here. Keep the clean dishes stocked up front. Don't break anything and don't get in anyone's way." David nodded and put on the apron Derek handed him. "Yes, sir. I understand." "Good, breakfast starts at 7. It gets crazy fast, so keep up." Derek walked away, leaving David alone at the dish machine. He had eaten at hundreds of restaurants but had never actually worked in a kitchen before. The machine looked complicated with buttons and switches he didn't understand. A young man with tattoos on his arms came over. "First day?" "Yes, I'm Miguel. I'm Carlos. I'll show you how this thing works." Carlos spent 10 minutes explaining the dish machine, where everything went, and how to keep up during busy times. The most important thing is to stay caught up. If you fall behind, everyone gets angry. David thanked Carlos and started washing the breakfast prep dishes. The work was harder than he expected. The dishes were heavy, the water was hot, and he had to move fast to keep up. As the morning went on, David watched everything happening around him. The kitchen had 4 people total: Carlos on the breakfast grill, an older man named Roberto making eggs, a woman preparing vegetables, and the cook he had noticed during his visit. She seemed to be in charge of everything, moving between stations and helping wherever needed. During a quiet moment around 9, David approached the woman. She was probably in her early 30s with kind eyes but tired features. Her name tag said Elena. "Excuse me," David said in his practiced accent. "I'm Miguel, the new dishwasher." Elena looked up from the prep work she was doing. "Nice to meet you, Miguel. I'm Elena. How's your first day going?" "Good, thank you." "You seem very busy." Elena smiled, but it looked forced. "Always busy here." "But that's okay. Work is work." David noticed that Elena had been there since before he arrived at 6, and it was already past 9. "What time did you start today?" 5:30. "Had to get the prep done for breakfast." Elena went back to chopping vegetables, signaling that the conversation was over. Throughout the morning, David kept watching Elena. She worked at every station, helping Carlos with the grill when orders backed up, making salads, preparing soups for lunch, and cleaning as she went. She moved like someone who had been doing this for years, but she also looked exhausted. Around 11, Derek came into the kitchen. "Elena, I need you to stay for lunch service, too." Roberto called in sick for his afternoon shift. Elena stopped chopping and looked at Derek. "But I already worked the breakfast prep. That's 10 hours if I stay for lunch. Look, we're short-staffed. You want to keep this job or not?" David saw Elena's shoulders slump. "Yes, of course. I'll stay." "Good. And make sure the new guy doesn't mess up back there." Derek pointed at David and walked away. Elena continued working, but David could see the tiredness in her movements. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what. As the owner, he could fix this immediately, but as Miguel the dishwasher, he had to stay quiet and observe. The lunch rush started at 11:30 and was even crazier than breakfast. Orders came in fast and the kitchen became a whirlwind of activity. David struggled to keep up with the dirty dishes while trying to stay out of everyone's way. Elena worked like a machine, cooking multiple orders at once while calling out instructions to Carlos and the other staff. She never sat down, never took a break, and barely had time to drink water. Around 2 in the afternoon, things finally slowed down. Most of the kitchen staff took a break sitting outside or checking their phones. Elena kept working, cleaning equipment and preparing for the dinner shift. David decided to take a chance. He walked over with a bottle of water. "Elena, you should drink something. It's hot in here." She looked surprised that he noticed. "Thank you, Miguel. That's very kind. You've been working since 5:30. Don't you get a break?" Elena glanced around to make sure Derek wasn't nearby. "Sometimes there's no time for breaks. Too much work to do. But that's not right. Everyone needs breaks." Elena's expression changed. She looked scared. "Please don't say anything to Derek. I need this job. My daughter. She needs me to work." David felt his heart sink. "I won't say anything. I promise." Elena smiled gratefully and went back to work. David returned to his dish station, but his mind was racing. Something was very wrong here. Elena was clearly being overworked, and she was too scared to complain about it. As the afternoon continued, David paid closer attention to how Derek treated Elena compared to the other employees. When Carlos made a mistake with an order, Derek just reminded him to be more careful. When Elena was 30 seconds slow getting a salad ready, Derek snapped at her in front of everyone. "Elena, we don't have all day. Customers are waiting." "Sorry, Derek, I'll be faster." "You better be. We can't afford slow workers." David clenched his fists but forced himself to stay quiet. This was his restaurant, and one of his employees was being treated badly right in front of him. But he needed to understand the whole situation before he acted. Around 4 o'clock, David overheard a conversation that made his blood boil. Derek was talking to another manager on the phone in the back office, but the door was open. "Yeah, Elena will work the dinner shift too. She never complains about the hours." "No, we don't pay overtime." "Why would we? She's happy to have the work. Trust me, she won't cause any problems." David realized that Elena wasn't just working a long day by accident. Derek was deliberately scheduling her for multiple shifts, and from what he heard, she wasn't getting paid properly for all those hours. When his dish shift ended at 5, David didn't want to leave. Elena was still there, starting dinner prep after working for almost 12 hours straight. She looked like she could barely stand up, but she kept working. Carlos noticed David hesitating by the time clock. "You can go, Miguel. Your shift is over." "What about Elena? When does she get to go home?" Carlos looked around nervously. "Elena, she works a lot. Derek says the restaurant needs her. But how many hours is she working?" "I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't ask questions about that stuff." David punched out and walked to his car, but he sat there for an hour watching the restaurant. Elena's car was still in the parking lot. Through the kitchen window, he could see her still working as the dinner rush began. Driving home, David felt sick to his stomach. In just one day undercover, he had discovered that one of his employees was being exploited in ways he never imagined. Elena was working at least 12 hours a day, probably more, and Derek was treating her like property instead of a person. But David knew this was just the beginning. If Elena was being treated this badly, what else was happening at his restaurant that he didn't know about? Tomorrow he would dig deeper and find out exactly what Derek was doing to his employees. David barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elena's tired face and heard Derek's cruel voice. He kept thinking about what Carlos had said. Maybe you shouldn't ask questions about that stuff. Why were the employees so scared to talk about working conditions? The next morning, David arrived at work with a small notebook hidden in his pocket. He had decided to document everything he saw. If Derek was really exploiting Elena and possibly other workers, David needed proof of what was happening. Elena was already there when he walked into the kitchen at 6. She looked even more exhausted than the day before, her eyes red and her movements slower. "Good morning." "Elena," David said as he put on his apron. "Morning, Miguel." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What time did you get here today?" Elena glanced around nervously before answering. 5. Had to start the bread for breakfast. David felt his anger rising. She had worked until at least 9 the night before, which meant she got maybe 7 hours to go home, sleep, and come back. But as he watched her work, he started to wonder if she had even gone home at all. During his first break, David decided to explore the restaurant a little. He walked toward the employee bathroom in the back hallway, pretending he was looking for supplies. What he found there made his stomach turn. Behind the bathroom door, someone had made a makeshift sleeping area. Old aprons were folded into a pillow, and towels were arranged like a small mattress on the floor. A water bottle and some crackers sat nearby. David's hands shook as he realized what this meant. Someone was sleeping at the restaurant instead of going home. Given Elena's exhaustion and long hours, he had a terrible feeling he knew who. He quickly went back to the dish station and wrote notes in his hidden notebook. Sleeping area in employee bathroom. Elena worked 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. yesterday, back at 5 a.m. today. Only 8 hours between shifts. Throughout the morning, David paid careful attention to the schedule board near the office. Elena's name was written for breakfast prep, lunch service, and dinner service. 3 different shifts that should have been done by 3 different people. When Derek came in around 10, David watched how he interacted with Elena. The assistant manager spoke to her differently than everyone else, like she was his property instead of his employee. "Elena, table 6 is complaining their food is taking too long," Derek said harshly. "I'm working as fast as I can," Elena replied, sweat dripping down her face as she managed 4 pans at once. "Well, work faster. We can't afford to lose customers because you're slow." Carlos shot Derek an angry look but didn't say anything. David noticed that all the other employees seemed uncomfortable when Derek talked to Elena this way. But nobody spoke up. During lunch rush, David overheard Derek on the phone again. This time he was talking to someone about payroll. "No, put Elena down for 40 hours this week, not 80. I don't care how many shifts she worked. 40 hours is what we pay. Trust me, she won't complain." David almost dropped the plate he was washing. Elena was working double shifts every day, but Derek was only paying her for regular full-time hours. That wasn't just unfair, it was stealing. He quickly wrote more notes. Derek telling payroll to only pay Elena for 40 hours despite working 80-plus hours. This is wage theft. Around 2 in the afternoon, David got his chance to learn more. Derek left for a meeting and the kitchen was quiet between lunch and dinner. David approached Carlos, who seemed like the most approachable person on the staff. "Carlos, can I ask you something?" "Sure, Miguel." "What's up?" "Elena works so many hours. Is that normal here?" Carlos looked around to make sure they were alone. "Look, Miguel, you seem like a good guy, but you need to be careful asking questions about Elena." "What do you mean?" "Derek has some kind of hold over her. None of us really understand it, but she's scared of him. Really scared." "Scared of what?" Carlos hesitated. "I think it has something to do with her immigration status. Derek is always making comments about calling authorities if she doesn't do what he wants." David felt sick. If Derek was threatening Elena with immigration problems, that explained why she was too frightened to stand up for herself. "How long has this been going on?" David asked. "Maybe 6 months. Ever since Derek became assistant manager. Before that, Elena worked normal shifts like everyone else. Why doesn't anyone report this?" Carlos shrugged sadly. "Report it to who? Derek is the boss here, and Elena begs us not to say anything. She's terrified she'll lose her job." David thanked Carlos and went back to washing dishes, but his mind was racing. Derek wasn't just a bad manager. He was systematically exploiting Elena using threats and fear. That afternoon, David decided to take a bigger risk. When Elena went to the storage room to get supplies, he followed her. "Elena, can we talk for a minute?" She looked startled. Miguel, we shouldn't be talking back here. Derek doesn't like it when people aren't working. I know you're working too many hours. That's not fair. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Please don't say anything. I need this job. My daughter needs me to work. You have a daughter? Yes, she's 8 years old. She has diabetes and needs medicine. Very expensive medicine. David's heart broke. Elena wasn't just being exploited. She was being trapped by her love for her child. Where is your daughter now? She stays with a babysitter during the week. I only see her on Sundays, my only day off. Only Sundays? How many days a week do you work? Elena looked terrified to answer. 6 days. Sometimes 7 if someone calls in sick. And how many hours each day? 15, 16 hours. Sometimes more. David quickly did the math in his head. Elena was working nearly 100 hours a week, but only getting paid for 40. She was making less than minimum wage for the actual hours she worked. Elena, this isn't legal. Derek can't make you work that much without proper pay. You don't understand, Elena whispered. Derek has my papers. My immigration documents. He says if I complain, he'll call the immigration police and they'll send me back to Guatemala. Then I can't take care of my daughter. What papers? When I got hired, Derek said he needed to keep my work permit and social security card for company records. But he never gave them back. Now he says I can't quit or complain because he has proof I'm illegal. David felt rage building inside him. Derek wasn't just stealing Elena's wages. He was holding her immigration documents hostage and threatening her with deportation. Elena, Derek can't keep your documents. That's against the law. Maybe for American citizens, but not for people like me. David wanted to tell her the truth, that Derek was lying, that employers couldn't keep worker documents, that she had rights regardless of her immigration status. But he couldn't reveal who he really was, not yet. Have you tried to get help? Elena shook her head. Who would believe me? Derek is very smart. He makes sure everything looks normal on paper. And if I make trouble, I lose everything. They heard footsteps in the hallway. Elena quickly grabbed a box of supplies and rushed back to the kitchen. David followed a minute later, pretending he had been looking for cleaning supplies. For the rest of his shift, David watched Derek with new eyes. The assistant manager wasn't just a bad boss, he was running a criminal operation. He was using Elena's fears about immigration to force her into what was essentially slavery. When David finally left work that evening, Elena was still there starting the dinner shift. She had been working for 13 hours straight and had at least 4 more hours to go. Sitting in his car, David pulled out his phone and called his head of security. It was time to involve the authorities. What Derek was doing to Elena wasn't just wrong, it was human trafficking. And David was going to make sure Derek paid for every single crime he had committed. David couldn't stop thinking about Elena's words. Derek has my papers. The phrase kept repeating in his head as he drove home. He had built Harbor Eats to be a place where hardworking people could earn a fair living. And instead, one of his restaurants had become a place where a single mother was being held captive through fear and threats. The next morning, David arrived early and hid in his car until he saw Derek leave for his usual coffee run. Then he quickly went inside and found Elena in the prep kitchen, already working despite the restaurant not opening for another hour. Elena, we need to talk, David said quietly. She looked up, startled. Miguel, you're early. Derek will be angry if he sees you here before your shift. Derek's getting coffee. We have maybe 10 minutes. David pulled a chair close to where she was working. Yesterday you told me about your daughter. Can you tell me more? Elena's hands stopped moving. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Why do you want to know? Because I think you're in trouble and maybe I can help. Elena was quiet for a long time, continuing to chop vegetables. Finally, she spoke in a whisper. My daughter's name is Sophia. She's 8 years old and the most beautiful little girl in the world. Elena's voice got soft when she talked about her daughter. We came here from Guatemala 2 years ago. Things were very dangerous there. Bad men wanted to hurt us because my husband owed them money. Your husband? He died in a car accident 3 years ago. But the debt didn't die with him. These men said I had to pay what he owed or they would take Sophia. David felt his chest tighten. So you came to America? We walked for weeks to get to the border. Sophia was so brave. Never complained even when her feet were bleeding. When we got here, we asked for asylum. The immigration people said we could stay while they decided our case. Elena paused to wipe her eyes with her sleeve. For the first year, everything was okay. I found work at a small restaurant. Sophia started school and learned English so fast. But then she got sick. What happened? Diabetes. Type 1. She needs insulin every day or she could die. The insulin costs $800 every month, and that's just the medicine. She also needs to see the doctor, get blood tests and special food. David's heart sank as he understood. $800 a month would be impossible on a restaurant worker's salary, even with good wages. The insurance from my old job didn't cover her medicine. I was working 60 hours a week and still couldn't pay for everything Sophia needed. That's when Derek found me. How did you meet Derek? He came to the restaurant where I worked. Said he heard I was a good cook and worked hard. Offered me a job here with better pay and insurance that would cover Sophia's medicine. Elena's voice became bitter. At first it seemed like a miracle. Derek was so helpful. He said Harbor Eats had great benefits for families. He even offered to help me with my immigration paperwork. What kind of help? He said the asylum process was complicated, and I might make mistakes that could get us deported. He offered to hold my documents and handle everything through a lawyer friend of his. David felt sick realizing how Derek had manipulated Elena's fears to trap her. So I gave him my work permit, social security card, even Sophia's school records. Derek said it was normal, that all good employers keep employee documents safe. But that's not normal, Elena. Employers can't keep your personal documents. I know that now, but 2 years ago I was scared and desperate. Derek seemed like he wanted to help. Elena wiped her hands on her apron and looked directly at David. The first month was good. I worked normal shifts, got paid fairly, and Sophia's insulin was covered. But then Derek started asking me to work extra hours. When did it get bad? About 6 months ago. Derek said the restaurant was losing money and needed to cut staff. He said if I could cover some extra shifts, he could keep me employed and keep Sophia's insurance. David nodded, encouraging her to continue. At first, it was just an extra shift here and there, but then it became every day. Derek said if I complained, he would fire me and report to immigration that I was an illegal worker. But you're not illegal. You have asylum status. Elena shook her head sadly. Derek convinced me that my case was going badly. He said his lawyer friend told him I would probably be deported soon. The only way to stay was to keep this job and not cause trouble. David realized Derek had been lying to Elena about her immigration case to keep her scared and compliant. Elena, when was the last time you actually saw your immigration lawyer? I never met him. Derek said he was handling everything. David's hands clenched into fists. Derek had probably never hired a lawyer at all. He was just using Elena's fears to control her. Tell me about now. How many hours are you really working? Elena looked around nervously before answering. I get here at 5 in the morning for breakfast prep. I work breakfast service, then lunch, then dinner. Most nights I don't leave until 10 or 11. That's 18 hours a day. Sometimes more if there's cleaning or inventory. And Derek makes me come in on my day off if someone calls in sick. How often do you get to see Sophia? Elena's eyes filled with tears. I pick her up from the babysitter on Sunday mornings and spend a few hours with her. That's all. She cries every time I have to bring her back. David felt his heart breaking. Where does Sophia stay the rest of the time? With Mrs. Garcia, an older lady who takes care of kids. Sophia sleeps there 6 nights a week. She asks me every Sunday why I can't take her home with me. What do you tell her? I tell her mommy has to work hard so she can have her medicine. But she's 8 years old. She doesn't understand why other kids get to live with their parents, and she doesn't. Elena broke down crying. Last Sunday, Sophia asked if I loved my job more than I loved her. How do you explain to a little girl that you're trapped? David had to look away to hide his own tears. Elena wasn't just being exploited at work. She was being stolen from her daughter during the most important years of the child's life. Elena, where do you sleep during the week? Here at the restaurant. There's a small space behind the bathroom where I put some towels and rest for a few hours between shifts. You're sleeping on the floor? It's easier than going home. Derek schedules me so early and I would only get 3 or 4 hours at my apartment before having to drive back. This way I save gas money and get a little more sleep. David realized that Elena was essentially living at the restaurant, working almost every waking hour, and only seeing her daughter 1 day a week. Derek had turned her into a slave while convincing her it was necessary to save her child's life. Elena, Derek is lying to you about everything. You have rights even as an asylum seeker. What he's doing is illegal. Elena shook her head. You don't understand, Miguel. If I lose this job, Sophia loses her insurance. Without insurance, her insulin costs more than I could make at any job. And if Derek calls immigration, he can't call immigration to hurt you. That's not how it works, and maybe not for you. But for people like me, we're always afraid. They heard Derek's car pulling into the parking lot. Elena quickly wiped her eyes and went back to chopping vegetables. Please don't say anything to Derek about this conversation, she whispered. I can't lose this job. Sophia needs me. David nodded and went to his dish station, but his mind was racing. Elena wasn't just being cheated out of wages. She was being psychologically tortured with threats about her daughter's health and their safety in America. As Derek walked into the kitchen, David watched him with complete disgust. The assistant manager wasn't just a criminal. He was a monster who was destroying a family while pretending to help them. David knew he had enough information now. Tonight he would call the authorities and end Derek's reign of terror. But first he had to figure out how to help Elena and Sophia rebuild their lives after this nightmare was over. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Sophia, an 8-year-old girl who only saw her mother one day a week because a monster was using her medical needs to control her mother. David had seen enough. It was time to act. At midnight, David called his head of security, James Wilson. James had worked with David for 8 years and was one of the few people who knew about the undercover operation. James, I need you to contact the FBI tomorrow morning. We have a human trafficking situation at the Seattle restaurant. How bad is it, boss? Worse than I imagined. Derek is holding an employee's immigration documents, forcing her to work nearly 100 hours a week for 40 hours of pay, and threatening her with deportation if she complains. She's sleeping at the restaurant and only sees her 8-year-old daughter one day a week. James was quiet for a moment. That's federal crime territory. I'll call my contact at the FBI first thing in the morning. Good, and James, I want Derek arrested as soon as possible. Every day we wait is another day this woman suffers. The next morning, David went to work as usual, but everything felt different. He knew that by the end of the day, Derek would be in handcuffs and Elena's nightmare would be over. Elena looked even more exhausted than usual. David noticed she was moving slower and seemed unsteady on her feet. Elena, are you okay? He asked during a quiet moment, just tired. Sophia had to go to the hospital Sunday night. Her blood sugar was very high. David felt panic rising in his chest. Is she okay now? Yes, but the hospital bill will be expensive even with insurance. I need to work extra hours to pay for it. Elena, you're already working too many hours. You can't work more. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I don't have a choice, Miguel. If I can't pay the hospital bill, they might stop treating Sophia. David wanted to scream. Derek's exploitation wasn't just hurting Elena. It was putting her daughter's life at risk. A mother was being forced to choose between her own health and her child's medical care. Around 10 in the morning, David saw 3 black SUVs pull into the parking lot. His heart started racing. The FBI had arrived. Derek was in the office when 6 federal agents walked through the front door. David watched through the kitchen window as they showed their badges to the hostess and asked to speak with the manager. Derek came out of the office looking confused. Can I help you? Derek Thompson, FBI. We need to speak with you. Elena froze when she heard the word FBI. Her face went completely white. Miguel, what's happening? She whispered. I don't know, David lied. Maybe it's just routine. But Derek's conversation with the agents was clearly not routine. David could see Derek getting more nervous as they talked. After about 10 minutes, one of the agents pulled out handcuffs. Derek Thompson, you're under arrest for human trafficking, wage theft, and immigration document fraud. Elena dropped the knife she was holding. It clattered to the floor as she stared in shock. Miguel, they're arresting Derek. What if he tells them about me? What if they deport me? Elena, calm down. You haven't done anything wrong, but Elena was panicking. They'll send me back to Guatemala. Sophia will lose her insurance. I have to run. David grabbed Elena's arm gently. Elena, listen to me. You're not in trouble. Derek is the criminal here, not you. One of the FBI agents came into the kitchen. Are you Elena Vasquez? Elena nodded, trembling. Ma'am, we need to speak with you. You're not in trouble. You're the victim here. David watched as Elena broke down crying. I can't be deported. My daughter needs me. Ma'am, no one is deporting you. We're here to help you. The FBI agent looked around the kitchen and noticed David. And you are? This was the moment David had been dreading and anticipating. It was time to reveal who he really was. Agent, my name is David Park. I'm the owner of Harbor Eats Restaurants. Elena stared at David in complete shock. Miguel, you're the owner? David pulled off his contact lenses and ran his fingers through his dyed black hair. Elena, I'm sorry I lied to you. I came here undercover because I knew something was wrong, but I had no idea how bad it was. Elena looked confused and scared. You're the boss? Are you going to fire me? Fire you? Elena, you're the victim here. Derek was stealing from you and threatening you. I'm going to make sure you get every penny you're owed. The FBI agent nodded. Mr. Park has been providing us with information about Derek's illegal activities. Elena, Derek was committing serious crimes against you. Over the next 2 hours, Elena told the FBI everything while David sat beside her, offering support. She explained about her immigration documents, the forced overtime, the threats, and the sleeping at the restaurant. When Elena finished her statement, the lead FBI agent turned to David. Mr. Park, we'll need your undercover documentation as evidence. Of course, whatever you need. The agent looked at Elena. Ma'am, Derek Thompson will be facing federal charges that could put him in prison for many years. You're safe now. Elena was still struggling to understand. But my documents. Derek has all my papers. We recovered your documents from Derek's office. Your immigration status is completely legal. Derek was lying to you. David pulled out his phone. Elena, I'm calling our company lawyer right now. She's going to help you with everything. Your immigration case, getting your daughter's insurance sorted out, and making sure you get all the money Derek stole from you. I don't understand. Why are you helping me? David looked at Elena with tears in his eyes. Because what Derek did to you is the opposite of everything Harbor Eats stands for, and because no mother should have to choose between seeing her child and keeping her child alive. The FBI agent handed Elena a business card. Mrs. Vasquez, we'll need you to testify when Derek goes to trial. But for now, you're free to go home to your daughter. Elena started crying again. I can go get Sophia? Yes, David said. In fact, let me drive you. Where is she? 20 minutes later, David and Elena pulled up in front of Mrs. Garcia's house. Elena was so nervous she could barely walk to the front door. When the door opened, a little girl with dark curls and bright eyes ran into Elena's arms. Mama, you're here early. It's not Sunday. Sophia, my beautiful girl. Mama doesn't have to work so much anymore. David watched from the car as Elena held her daughter for the first time in days. Both of them were crying happy tears. Mrs. Garcia came out to talk to Elena. Is everything okay, dear? Yes, Mrs. Garcia, better than okay. Sophia and I get to go home together. When Elena and Sophia got in the car, Sophia looked at David curiously. Mama, who is this man? This is Mr. David, Sophia. He's a very good man who helped Mama. Sophia smiled. Thank you for helping my mama, Mr. David. She works too much. Not anymore. Sophia, your mama is going to have normal working hours from now on. 6 months later, David visited the Seattle restaurant again. But this time he came as himself, the owner making his regular rounds. Elena was working as the head chef, managing a full kitchen staff during reasonable hours. She had her own apartment where she and Sophia lived together every night. Sophia's diabetes was well controlled with proper insurance and regular doctor visits. Mr. David, Sophia ran up to him when she saw him. Elena brought her to work sometimes after school and she would do homework in the office. Hello, Sophia, how's school going? Great. I'm learning to cook like Mama. She's teaching me to make pancakes. Elena walked over, smiling. She looked healthy and rested. Completely different from the exhausted woman David had met undercover. Thank you again, Mr. David. For everything. Elena, you don't need to thank me. You deserve so much better than what Derek did to you. Derek had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for human trafficking and wage theft. Elena received over $50,000 in back pay and damages. But most importantly, she got her life back. As David watched Elena work alone,